There's a fascinating shift happening in European wine, a kind of silent revolution, really. It goes way beyond just the usual vintage-to-vintage chatter we hear.
Yeah, definitely.
We're talking about a fundamental rethink, almost, of how wine is made, a different philosophy altogether.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So today's deep dive, it takes us right into the natural wine movement in Europe.
Okay.
And we'll be using a revolução do vinho natural na Europa.
Right.
And also vinho natural na uma análise completa sob o olhar de sommelier as our guides, sort of.
Sources.
Yeah, to help us navigate this really interesting territory.
Exactly. So our mission, really, is to get under the skin of natural wine.
Yeah.
What are its core principles? What's driving this, increasing popularity?
Big questions.
And, crucially, how does it stack up against other types of wine you might be familiar with? Organic, biodynamic.
And conventional.
And the more conventional bottles on the shelf.
Yeah. Well, we'll be digging into those core values that really fuel this movement, the guiding principles for these producers.
Okay.
Think about a commitment to authenticity, a really profound respect for sustainability, and that deep connection to terroir, that sort of elusive sense of place.
Right, that somewhereness.
Exactly. That makes every wine express its origin in a unique way.
Okay, so let's maybe tackle the terminology head on, because it can definitely feel like alphabet soup sometimes.
It really can.
Organic, biodynamic, low intervention. They all sound like they're aiming for something similar, but there must be some key distinctions, right?
Precisely. Yeah, let's start with organic viticulture. At its heart, it's about what's not used in the vineyard.
Okay, what's up?
So synthetic pesticides, herbicides, chemical fertilizers, and GMOs, genetically modified organisms, they're all prohibited.
Right, got it.
Instead, growers focus on more natural methods for managing pests and diseases.
Makes sense.
They enrich the soil through things like composting, and they also face certain restrictions on using sulfites during the winemaking.
Ah, okay, so in the winery too, not just the field.
To some extent, yes. And often you'll see certifications, from independent bodies like the EU organic label on these wines.
Okay, so that's organic. It's about avoiding certain inputs, mainly in the vineyard, somewhat in the winery.
Pretty much.
Now, biodynamic.
Yep.
That seems to take it a step further. It sounds like a much broader, almost philosophical approach.
It definitely has a more holistic perspective, yeah. Biodynamic viticulture views the entire vineyard as, well, a living, breathing organism.
Wow, okay.
Deeply connected to its surrounding ecosystem and even, to broader cosmic rhythm.
Cosmic rhythms.
Like the moon.
Exactly. Practitioners use specific biodynamic preparations, things like burying manure-filled cow horns in the soil.
Okay, that's different.
It is. Or spraying silica infusions. The idea is to enhance soil health and plant vitality.
Yeah. And they also often synchronize their farming practices with a lunar and planetary calendar.
So really tuning into natural cycles.
Very much so. And certification for biodynamic wines often comes from organizations like Demeter, which have their own very specific, rigorous standards.
Okay, so it's not just about leaving stuff out. It's actively working with these natural, even celestial cycles.
That's a good way to put it.
Then we have low-intervention wines. Where do they fit in this picture? Is it just another name?
Well, low intervention is a bit more encompassing as a term.
Yeah.
It can include wines that are certified organic or biodynamic, sure.
Right.
But it also applies to producers who use sustainable practices without necessarily going for the formal certification.
I see. So maybe flying under the radar a bit, certification-wise.
Could be. The primary focus here is really on minimizing intervention in the cellar.
Okay, the winemaking itself.
Exactly. So that means avoiding excessive additions of sulfites, harsh filtration methods, and, other techniques that could be seen as manipulative.
Right. Okay, so it's almost like a spectrum of involvement, maybe.
Yeah.
With each category having its own focus.
Yeah, that's a fair way to look at it.
Now, natural wine, this feels like where the less is more idea is really taken to its furthest point. What truly defines a natural wine?
You've hit on a key point there. Natural wine definitely builds upon that foundation of organic or often biodynamic grape growing. That's usually the starting point.
Okay, so healthy grapes are step one.
Absolutely essential. But the truly defining principles, they really manifest in the cellar, in the winemaking process.
How so?
Well, first, fermentation must occur spontaneously. That means using only the indigenous yeasts.
The wild yeasts.
Yeah.
The ones already on the grapes.
Exactly. Those naturally present on the skins and just floating around in the winery environment.
And why is that so important for them?
It's highly prized because it's believed to contribute to a more authentic, more nuanced expression of the wine's terroir.
Ah, back to that sense of place.
Right. Unlike cultured yeasts, which are, selected for predictable results.
Like a specific flavor profile.
Yeah, or a certain fermentation speed. Indigenous yeasts, they often contribute a much wider array of complex esters and byproducts.
So, potentially more complexity, more surprises.
Potentially, yes. It can lead to unexpected and, proponents argue, more terroir-expressive aromas and flavors that you just don't get with standardized yeast strains.
Okay. Indigenous yeasts, the vineyard's own little helpers doing the work. Makes sense for capturing a place.
Yeah.
What else is fundamental?
Sulfites. The addition of sulfites is either drastically reduced or, in many cases, completely eliminated.
Whoa, no sulfites at all. That sounds risky. Don't they preserve the wine?
They absolutely do. Sulfites are preservatives and antioxidants. So by minimizing or skipping them, natural winemakers are accepting a higher risk.
Risk of what?
Spoilage, oxidation, things like that. But the potential payoff is unlocking a more vibrant, perhaps more nuanced aromatic spectrum in the wine.
So the sulfites might kind of dull things down sometimes.
That's the argument, that they can sometimes mask more delicate aromatic compounds, but it definitely requires meticulous attention to detail, hygiene.
Right, you can't afford mistakes.
Absolutely not. Then there's filtration. It's either avoided entirely or kept incredibly light.
So the wine might look hazy?
It often does, yeah. This can affect the wine's texture, often making it feel fuller and maybe adds complexity, but it's different from crystal clear conventional wine.
Okay. No added yeasts, minimal or no sulfites, minimal filtration. Anything else?
Yes, and this is crucial. A strict avoidance of any other corrective or additive enological practices.
Like what? What kind of corrections?
We're talking about things like artificially adjusting the acidity, either adding acid or taking it away.
Which happens quite a lot in conventional wine, right?
It can, yes, especially in challenging vintages or certain climates. Also, adding sugar to boost alcohol levels, that's called chaptalization. Or introducing things like powdered tannins or specific enzymes to extract more color or flavor. Or using aggressive clarifying agents like bentonite or isinglass to make the wine super clear.
Wow. So none of that is allowed in natural wine?
None of it. It's really about letting the grape and the vintage speak for themselves.
So it truly is about allowing the wine to become what it sort of naturally wants to be.
That's the essence.
It sounds like the purest possible expression of the grape, the land, and that specific year with as little human meddling as possible.
That's the core philosophy, yes. It's a profound belief in nature's ability to produce great wine, provided the conditions are right, and human intervention is kept, well, absolutely minimal.
This isn't just some flash-in-the-pan trend, though, is it? This movement has roots, right? A history. It didn't just appear yesterday.
Oh, absolutely not. No, the natural wine movement really started gaining momentum as a direct reaction against the industrialization of winemaking.
When did that happen?
That trend really accelerated in the 20th century, the push for, greater efficiency, higher yields.
Making more wine faster, cheaper.
Pretty much. And that led to the widespread adoption of synthetic chemicals in the vineyards and using commercially selected yeasts in wineries for really predictable fermentations.
And those changes, they had broader consequences than just more wine, didn't they?
Indeed, they did. These practices contributed to some significant environmental concerns.
Like what?
Things like soil and water contamination from the chemicals, a noticeable decline in biodiversity within vineyard ecosystems.
Fewer bugs, fewer plants.
Exactly. Potential health implications, too, for vineyard workers and maybe consumers. And also what many people felt was a homogenization of wine styles.
Meaning wine started tasting kind of the same.
That was the feeling, yeah. That wines were losing their individual character, their connection to place, and starting to taste increasingly similar, regardless of where they came from.
So the natural wine movement was, in many ways, a deliberate pushback against all that.
Absolutely. A conscious counter-movement.
A decision to return to more traditional ways. Less interventionist.
Precisely. It was a conscious choice to go back to sort of ancestral, less manipulative practices, both in the vineyard and in the cellar.
Driven by what? A desire for something different?
Driven by a deep desire to achieve greater authenticity in the wines and a much more genuine reflection of their terroir.
And those core values we touched on earlier, sustainability, biodiversity, that deep respect for terroir, they sound absolutely central to this whole philosophy.
They are completely intertwined. You can't really separate them. Sustainability is paramount.
How does that show up?
It drives the embrace of organic and biodynamic farming methods. The focus is on long-term soil health, minimizing negative environmental impacts.
Right, and biodiversity.
Also essential. It's seen as key for creating a resilient, balanced ecosystem in the vineyard.
Which means you need fewer chemical interventions later.
Exactly. Nature helps take care of itself, to a degree.
And the terroir, that sense of place we keep coming back to, that seems like the ultimate goal here.
It really is. The overarching aim is to allow that unique set of characteristics that define a specific vineyard. The soil, the climate, the grape variety.
All that stuff.
All that stuff, yeah. To allow it to express itself authentically, without distortion, in the finished wine.
And that's achieved through minimal human interference, both out in the vines and in the winery.
That's the ticket. Minimal intervention is key.
Now, this movement, it hasn't unfolded uniformly across Europe, has it? I imagine some regions really jumped on it earlier or more strongly than others.
That's very true. There are certain regions that really took the lead, became almost synonymous with natural wine early on.
Where did it really start to gain serious traction?
France undoubtedly played a foundational role. The Loire Valley in particular is often considered a real cradle, a birthplace of the movement.
The Loire. Okay. Why there?
Well, you had some truly pioneering producers there, people like Nicolas Chailly, François Cheddain, Catherine, and Pierre Breton.
Names I've heard.
Right. And even the early work of Didier Dagueneau. They were all deeply committed to showcasing the distinctive terroir of the Loire.
Through which grapes, mainly.
Chenin Blanc. Chenin Blanc, absolutely. Also Cabernet Franc, Sauvignon Blanc. They really focused on letting those grapes speak of the place.
And the Loire is known for those diverse, and quite mineral-driven wines. So a low-intervention approach would really let that shine, I suppose.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? That approach allows those unique characteristics to come through very clearly.
What about other areas in France? Was it just the Loire?
Oh, no. Beaujolais also became hugely influential.
Beaujolais, Gamay country.
Exactly. Largely thanks to the visionary work of Marcel Lapierre.
A legend.
A legend, indeed. And the group, often called the Gang of Four, Jean Friard, Jean-Paul Thévenet, Guy Breton.
Right, I know those names too.
They fundamentally changed how Gamay was being produced there. They embraced organic, often biodynamic viticulture.
And sulfur.
Drastically reduced or eliminated the addition of sulfur. The result was these incredibly vibrant, expressive, really terroir-focused wines. Quite revolutionary at the time.
So Beaujolais became another hotspot. Anywhere else in France?
Yeah, beyond those two key areas, you started seeing a growing number of natural wine producers popping up in regions like the Rhône, Languedoc-Roussillon, Alsace, the Jura, Savoie.
Wow, all over.
It was a real grassroots movement, gaining momentum across the country.
Okay, so France was definitely an early and important hub. What about Italy? Do they have a similar pioneering spirit?
Absolutely. Italy has a huge natural wine scene now. Emilia-Romagna played a really significant role early on.
What were they known for?
Particularly in the realm of naturally sparkling wines, the ones known as col fondo.
Col fondo, meaning with the bottom, like unfiltered.
Exactly. They undergo their second fermentation in the bottle, like champagne, but they're left unfiltered with their lees, the sediment.
Ah, so cloudy sparklers.
Often, yeah. And there was a strong historical tradition of using indigenous yeasts in that region already, so visionary producers really championed a return to those methods.
Natural sparkling wine left on its lees. That sounds like it would add a whole different layer of complexity and texture.
It certainly does. And more broadly, across Italy, there was this significant rediscovery, a renewed appreciation for traditional, often sort of peasant-style viticulture.
Older ways of doing things?
Yeah, these older, less industrialized methods, they heavily influenced the burgeoning natural wine movement there.
Which other Italian regions stand out?
Oh, regions like Friuli, Venezia Giulia up in the northeast, they were pioneers with orange wines.
Right, the skin contact whites.
Exactly, and really dedicated to native grape varieties, thanks to hugely influential figures like Josko Gravner.
Gravner, yeah, big name.
Huge. Then Sicily, with its unique volcanic terroirs and producers like Frank Cornelissen.
Volcanic wine's another exciting area.
Definitely. And even in more classic regions like Piedmont and Tuscany, you saw estates like La Stopa or Castello de Rampolla embracing these philosophies. Labansi, Fattoria di Pomona, Monteraponi.
Lots going on there.
Sanguinetto, Stefano Amerigaghi, Laragne, Poderi Lurupi. It became widespread. All
But
became important centers for natural wine production.
orange wines, those fascinating skin-fermented whites, they've definitely become almost a signature of the natural wine movement, haven't they?
They really have a very visible part of it.
Okay, France, Italy.
Yeah.
What about Spain? Did they embrace this philosophy early on, too?
Spain certainly did, and it's another major player now. Catalonia really stands out significantly.
Near Barcelona.
That's right, particularly with the influential work of Pepe Raventos at Raventos y Blanc.
Ah, the sparkling wine producer.
Yes. His deep commitment to biodynamic farming for their sparkling wines, traditionally labeled cava, was so profound.
What happened?
It ultimately led them to leave the Cava Dio, the official appellation, altogether.
Really? They left Cava.
They did. They formed their own appellation, Conca de la Rianoia, really underscoring their unwavering dedication to quality and terroir expression over just the cava name.
Wow, that's a statement.
It really is. And you also have dynamic producers like Partida Crius adding a lot to the Catalan natural wine scene.
Any other Spanish regions?
Oh, yes. You see exciting developments in Galicia up in the northwest.
With Albarino.
Albarino, Godello, Mencía wines, yeah. Producers like Envinate doing great things there. Then in Andalusia, there's a fascinating exploration of natural sherry production.
Natural sherry.
Mm.
That sounds intriguing.
It is. And also regions like Aragon, Castilla y León,
Yeah.
with innovative producers like Olivier Rivière, Commando G, Envinate works there too.
So it really is a pan-European phenomenon. It's not just France and Italy.
Not at all. It's truly widespread.
And beyond these maybe more well-known Western European regions, are there other areas that really deserve a spotlight in this natural wine story?
Absolutely. You absolutely have to talk about Georgia.
Georgia, the country.
The country, yes, with its incredibly ancient tradition of Qvevri winemaking.
Those big clay pots buried underground.
Exactly, those large clay vessels buried underground, the natural fermentation, the often extended skin maceration for both red and white wine.
Right, they make orange wines in Qvevri too.
They do, and just the minimal intervention inherent in this millennia-old method, it's had a profound global influence on the modern natural wine movement.
So ancient traditions inspiring modern trends.
Precisely. Producers like Baez Wine, Pheasant's Tears, Ori Marani, wine artisans, there are many fantastic examples carrying on this tradition. Alapiani's Marani, Jekili Wines, Chona's Marani,
A long list.
Dado's Wine, Duremi Wine, Gelovani Cellar, Samtofi Mirani, Tanini Wines, Sikilishvili Wines, Vino Martville. Really vibrant.
Incredible. Okay, Georgia. Where else?
Slovenia and Croatia have also emerged as really important players.
Neighbors to Friuli in Italy, right?
Exactly. There's a strong focus on their indigenous grape varieties, a rising prominence again of orange wines, and a deep commitment to authentic expression.
Any names to look out for?
Producers like Movia, Gorilla, Keltis, Otar, Bati, they're crafting incredibly compelling wines in this natural vein.
Okay. And any surprises? Places you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Maybe surprisingly for some, even in more traditionally, let's say, conventional wine-producing nations like Germany and Austria.
Well, known for very precise Rieslings and Gruners.
Exactly. You're seeing a really exciting emergence of natural wine producers who are challenging those established norms, even with Riesling and Gruner Veltliner.
Really? Natural Riesling?
Oh, yes. Think of names like Klaus Preisinger, Gut Ogo in Austria,
Good Ogo, I know their labels.
Koppich, Pittenauer, Christian Schiede, Andreas Scheppe, Suppmuster, Strohmeyer. It just shows how widespread this philosophy has become. It's not confined to one or two countries.
It's fascinating to see how this philosophy is taking root, even in regions known for maybe a more controlled, more technically driven style of winemaking.
It really speaks to the underlying power of these core values, I think. Authenticity, sustainability.
But making wine with such minimal intervention, it can't be without its challenges, surely. It sounds romantic, but potentially difficult.
You're absolutely right. There are inherent challenges in this approach, no doubt about it.
Like, what's the main hurdle?
Well, one of the most significant is the natural variability you can find in natural wines.
Meaning they don't always taste the same.
Exactly. Because of the minimal intervention, the reliance on those indigenous yeasts, you might experience more variation from one bottle to the next.
Even within the same case?
Potentially, yes. And certainly from one vintage to another, maybe more dramatically than with conventional wines.
And that challenges our expectations, maybe.
It can challenge the traditional expectation of typicity, that idea that a wine from a specific place made from a specific grape should always taste a certain way.
Right, that predictable profile.
Yeah. So as a consumer, you have to be a bit more open, perhaps, to those individual nuances and differences between bottles or years.
So you have to embrace a bit more of the, well, unpredictable nature of the process as a consumer. Less consistency, maybe more personality.
That's a good way to frame it, exactly. Another key challenge is stability and preservation.
Because of the low sulfur.
Precisely.
Hmm.
With little to no added sulfites, these wines can be more vulnerable to oxidation, to microbial issues, other potential faults.
So they might not last as long. Or need careful storage.
Both can be true. Maintaining absolutely rigorous hygiene in the winery is non-negotiable.
Cleanliness is critical.
Beyond critical. And ensuring careful temperature control throughout the entire process, winemaking, storage, transportation, it becomes absolutely crucial.
More so than for conventional wine.
Generally, yes. It demands a very, very high level of attention to detail from the winemaker and everyone handling the wine.
It sounds like it's actually a much more hands-on approach in some ways, paradoxically, even though the aim is to intervene less chemically.
That's often the case. You have to be constantly vigilant, really attuned to what's happening in the wine because you don't have the same safety nets.
Right. No quick fixes with additives.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the ongoing aspect of consumer perception and education.
People understanding what they're drinking.
Yes. There's still a need to demystify natural wine for many consumers, help them understand what it is, why it might taste different.
Maybe look different, smell different.
All of the above. And to appreciate the philosophy behind it, not just dismiss it as faulty if it doesn't fit their expectations.
So to kind of bring it all together then, natural wine really represents this conscious return to minimal intervention,
Yes.
both in the vineyard and maybe especially in the cellar,
Definitely in the cellar.
with a strong emphasis on allowing that authentic expression of terroir and a deep commitment to sustainability underneath it all.
That's right.
And it really distinguishes itself from organic and biodynamic wines, even though it often starts there, through its particularly intense focus on what is not done during the winemaking process itself.
That's a very clear and accurate summary. That focus on non-intervention in the cellar is key. And we've explored, the incredible diversity of these wines across Europe and highlighted some of the really passionate, pioneering producers who are at the forefront driving this movement.
And despite those challenges we just talked about, the variability, the stability issues, the need for education,
Yeah, they're real.
it still seems like the growing enthusiasm among consumers and the potential for natural wine to maybe influence the broader wine industry towards more sustainable practices. It makes this a really exciting area to watch, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This isn't just some fringe niche trend anymore. It really has the potential, I think, to shape the future of European winemaking in some significant ways.
Okay, so for you, the listener, maybe here's a final thought to consider as we wrap up.
Yeah.
Why not seek out a bottle of natural wine? Maybe from one of the fascinating regions or producers we've talked about today.
Give it a try.
Yeah. Experience this silent revolution firsthand. Take a moment, maybe, to consider the connection between the wine that's actually in your glass, the land where it grew, and the dedicated hands that guided its creation with such minimal interference. What unique story, what different flavors might you discover within that bottle?
It could be quite revealing.
It's a whole new lens, really, with which to appreciate and enjoy the world of wine.